Shalom and welcome to Jerusalem Studio. When the Islamic Republic planned to act on its hegemonic ambitions, it set out to create a regional system of proxies in the Arabian Peninsula and the Eastern Mediterranean, the mastermind being Kassem Suleimani of the Revolutionary Guards Quds Force and the commander-in-chief, none other than the Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khameini. Now Suleimani is long gone, leaving Khamenei barely surviving along with his threatened regime, pending a military decision by U.S. President Donald Trump. What then are the prospects for the various proxies as the Tehran-led Axis is staring down a crossroads of both life and death? Joining us to discuss this matter include retired Brigadier General Mark Kimmitt, formerly a U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for Political Military Affairs, as well as a senior officer at the United States Central Command. It's good to see you, General.
Good to see you, Jonathan.
Good having you, Mark. Also joining us is Mr. Hussein Abdelhassan, who is a research fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies in Washington, D.C. Great having you with us, Hussein.
Hi, Jonathan. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Also, last but not least, TV7's editor-at-large, Mr. Amir. Establish a framework for us. Naturally, we do need to take into account that many of those proxies that were very much utilized by the Islamic Republic of Iran, heavily spent on, have launched a multi-front war against Israel on behest of Tehran, with October 8th having Hezbollah join the war. October 10th, we had a couple of Shiite militias in Syria join the war. October 17th of 23, we had also the Houthis in Yemen join. And subsequently, on November 2nd, Hashd-e-Shaabi from Iraq launched their first projectile. All these various proxies are not in the same state that they were in a couple of years ago.
So there are two issues here. One is whether the upcoming talks between presidential emissary Steve Witkoff and Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi are really going to deal not only with the first issue of the Iranian nuclear program, which is obviously the issue, but also the other two, the ballistic missiles, and number three, the proxies. This is one issue, whether it's on the table or not. The other dimension of the issue is that all of these proxies have interests and will of their own, presumably. They are not just puppets. The Houthis have their own ambitions regarding Yemen and perhaps more than Yemen, the Red Sea, Bab el-Mandeb, and other stuff. Hezbollah wants to survive in the political environment of Lebanon. What should Iran do if it does meet the demands? Should it stop financing those proxies? Should it stop trying to arm them? These are all issues which have not been deliberated yet.
Well, let's bring in our distinguished experts today. General Kimmitt, I'd like to start with you. Naturally, the proxies have been heavily battered over the last 2 years plus. They are no longer in the same capacity to exercise the will of Tehran, and in some circumstances, in light of the weak state of the Ayatollah regime itself and the threat hovering above it, some of those proxies need to consider whether or not joining the fight, so to speak, would not also spell an end to what they actually have been able to project over the past several years.
Well, I think that's right, Jonathan, but I'd also question what their objectives would be. It's clear they would not be able to help start a regional war as is so heavily advertised in Tehran, but that shouldn't cause us to ignore the fact that they could create a lot of damage and a lot of problems. Will they be a threat to Israel? No, I mean, they are not. These proxies were never an existential threat, but they were a serious threat. Now they're a lower level threat, but whether it's just simply creating individual terrorist attacks, kidnapping American citizens, kidnapping citizens from other countries. They still are a threat, perhaps not as potent as they used to be, but we should not discount their capabilities in an all-out war between the United States, its allies, and Iran.
Mr. Abdul Hussein, I'd like to hear your take on this from a regional perspective. Are we going to see more of an attempt to harmonize with one another between those proxies, or is this every proxy for itself?
I think for the time being, it is every proxy for itself because they need to rebuild. So it's not like any one of them can help the other. But I think what you can see in common is that they will all use the same model, which is they will try to hunker down and agree to whatever agreement is on the table, whether it's Hezbollah and the cessation of hostilities with Israel of November 2024 or the Gaza peace plan for Hamas. So they will pretend as if they're playing along. But behind the scenes, they will be rebuilding their capacity. This is the model that they've been using over the past 2 decades. You hunker down, you wait the storm to pass, you wait out the world until attention shifts somewhere else. You wait out Israel too, until Israel is tired of warring, and then you come back. And once each one of them comes back, I think they will try their best to reconnect. The way that Nasrallah used to call it, the unity of the fronts. So we see it happening, or we expect it at least to happen, and I think that's what they'll do moving forward.
Well, in today's episode, we are going to focus on each one of those proxies, not all proxies, since naturally we'll also discuss more of the umbrella alliances, Hashd al-Sha'bi and the Houthis, which happen to be a umbrella organization, or Ansar Allah, as they're defined in Yemen. Mr. Oren, let's start with the first front, Hezbollah in Lebanon. It's a single, most powerful militia that was the pride of the Ayatollah regime in Tehran. Today, it's a mere shadow of what it was merely a year and a half ago.
Yes, but a shadow with 20,000 or more rockets and missiles is still quite a shadow. And Israel is probably considering whether it's a risk or an opportunity. Now, we don't know what the division of labor is going to be should President Trump decide to strike, whether Israel is supposed to sit still, to join the fight against Iran, or to open a wholly separate front against Hezbollah. It could be such an opportunity. And if you go back to what happened to the Syrian Air Force in a couple of days in December of 2024, maybe Israel is planning such a lightning strike against the remaining assets of Hezbollah that it will happen. So Hezbollah is probably not going to join the fight, but it may not have a vote in it if it is forced upon it. And as was mentioned, it only joined the fight when Hamas started it in a very, very limited way, trying a war of attrition, standoff. And one other point, they will not coordinate because they understand that Western or Israeli intelligence can find more about the plan if it goes out of one compound in Tehran and is spread all over.
Well, that would be logical, but this type of logic is not always conscried in those type of organization. But nonetheless, I'd like to maintain focus on Hezbollah at this point in time. The Secretary General of Hezbollah, named Kassem, during this week on a couple of occasions has mentioned that yes, this organization of his is subject to repeated strikes. It is facing repeated strikes by Israel and is getting really hurt in a couple angles, of course, taking into account also the loss of its infrastructure, but also various operatives that are in charge of command of the mortar brigades and other aspects that have taken the command from their predecessors, and the predecessors of their predecessors are also now being targeted. So they are not in an easy position. General Kimmitt, when we're talking about Hezbollah, what should we take into our calculus?
Well, as you and I have always talked about, Jonathan, on this show, is the political calculus of Hezbollah. The fact remains is the military capability is one thing. The political insinuation into the structures of the government of Lebanon is another thing. I agree completely that this is not an existential threat or even a serious threat to Israel anymore. But I think the balance between their political strength and their military strength, that symbiotic relationship to the two, is certainly being affected by the continuing attrition by Israel of the Lebanese forces. So, but at the end of the day, I think that nothing will be of significance inside of Lebanon until we see the political fractures within Hezbollah inside of Beirut.
Thank you, General Kimmitt. Abdul Hussein, your take?
Well, I think even though they've been degraded significantly on the military side, I think politically they're still very strong, very much in charge. They're still dominant of the Lebanese state. And they also, Lebanon will go to election this May. No one thinks that Hezbollah will lose. At least it controls the Shia. It has a good chance of winning a majority. It can still coerce the non-Shia, the Druze, the Sunnis, the Christians to stand with it. So the party is still pretty strong. And I think the Lebanese government, even though all the speeches from the president and the prime minister indicate that they plan to counter them, they're not countering them. I mean, for many reasons, I think one of them would be U.S. inconsistency in dealing with that part of the world. You know, if you're Joseph Aoun and you look at what happened to the Kurds, you think, if I stick my neck out and go after Hezbollah, you know, maybe America or whoever supports me, maybe they will never come to the rescue. So, as long as we don't have a comprehensive plan, as long as each one of the foreign powers is pushing in its own direction, I don't think the Lebanese state will take on Hezbollah, which means that the party will remain strong in the foreseeable future on the political front, that is not the military side.
Even if we're talking about there's still 3 years. Within 3 years, there is much to do when we're talking about disarming an organization such as Hezbollah. Naturally, it would take longer than 3 years, and the majority of people discussing this issue at large are very pessimistic on the capacity to do so. But isn't there a scenario in which we could diminish Hezbollah's power to a point where Beirut could be comfortable enough to do so, not necessarily contingent to some type of foreign guarantee of sorts?
I'm guessing the 3 years, Jonathan, you mean President Trump's 3 years, right? Because
right. Yeah.
Yes, because the president of Lebanon still has 5 years on his clock.
Right.
The parliament is up, this spring. So, but you're right. I think in these 3 years, you would expect that the Lebanese government would stand up and knock out Hezbollah, at least on the ground. And you would expect the Lebanese government to stand up to Hezbollah in terms of the coercion that the militia practices. Its stranglehold on the Shia, number one, and then its coercion against the others. If you are someone who is vocal against Hezbollah, you are probably hiding in Beirut, even if you're not that big of a deal. As long as this is the case, I always tell friends in government, in U.S. government over here, is that the finish line in Lebanon should be for people like me who are originally from Lebanon to sit at a cafe and say, we need to disarm Hezbollah and go for peace with Israel. But this is not the case. No one thinks that we're there yet. So until we are there, until the government of Lebanon can stand up to Hezbollah, protect everyone, protect freedom of speech, protect people who demand peace with Israel, until this happens, I think, we have to keep on pushing, and hopefully it can happen in the coming 3 years.
Well, since the law of 97 or 98, I mean, saying you want peace with Israel is technically an offense, a criminal offense, and that would put you in trouble with the authorities in Lebanon, let alone Hezbollah. But, you know.
But you know, Jonathan, there are two levels of power as pertains to Hezbollah and also to Hamas. The Katyushas or the Qassams are not the same as the Kalashnikovs.
Right.
The missiles and rockets are against Israel. Even if all of them are gone, they will still have enough arms to try to overpower the indigenous forces in Lebanon or in Gaza.
Well, let's talk about Syria now, because there is not much to talk about Syria, but Iran is nonetheless trying to rehabilitate much of what was lost, particularly in the coastal regions, Latakia and Tartus and those areas. But to what degree can they still infiltrate Syria at a time when the jihadis in Damascus are the ones calling the shots?
There was a time, and perhaps General Kimmitt was at the time in Afghanistan or in Iraq. Maybe he was the only one not privy to it. There was a time when a New Yorker magazine cover by Steinberg was in vogue, and it looked at America from the perspective of someone in Manhattan. So he looked west, saw New Jersey, and then the rest until he got to California and the Pacific. From Iran, you look at Iraq. This is the major asset for Iran, unless Iraq is strong and is an enemy. And only then you look at Syria, at Jordan, and finally Lebanon, Israel, Mediterranean. Syria itself is an ally of Iran only if it has someone in between, like Iraq, or as a launching pad against Israel.
Indeed. Well, let's keep the Syria portfolio brief, if we may. General Kimmitt, I'd like to hear your take on this, since naturally there are still efforts by the Iranians not to turn over and just succumb to that territory that was a very important piece of land to transfer munitions from east to west.
No, I agree with you, but I think at this point in time, between the relative strength of the other proxies, Hezbollah and Hamas, for example, Hezbollah, who was the primary recipient of that land corridor from Iraq to Syria to the Hezbollah forces. I just don't see that there's a lot of foothold that Iran could achieve anytime soon inside of Syria. Obviously, the United States is still there. HTS, or whatever we're calling the new Syria regime's military, is still there. You're still there. So I think if I was in Tehran looking at that Steinberg version of the Middle East, I don't know if Syria would really be something in my scope right now. It'd be pretty much unsupported territory to Iran.
Well, with that being said, and I'd like to ask you, Abdel Hassan, about this, because the situation in Damascus and Syria at large is still very much fluid, and Iran has plenty of opportunities to exploit that fluidity to its advantage by abruptly bringing an end to this Turkish project of a jihadist Damascus, namely the forces of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham and Abu Muhammad al-Julani turned into Ahmad al-Shara. Is that something that the Iranians are trying to push for?
Well, I think at this time, the Iranians are pretty busy. You know, they have their hands full figuring other things out. But I think on the medium and longer term, assuming that whoever is in charge, HTS or, you know, the government of Syria, Shara, assuming that they will be opposed to Hezbollah until forever, that assumption should be revisited. I mean, both sides are Islamists and both sides hate Israel. And, you know, if something goes wrong or for some other calculus, you know, we've seen the Turks help Hezbollah in the past, and we know that Turkey is close to Shara. So if Turkey impresses on Shara that maybe, you know, you should be nice to Hezbollah and let the arms smuggling happen, that could happen. So, I mean, at this point, I don't see it as a threat to Israel, but there's no guarantee that Shara will remain an enemy of Hezbollah. We've seen him kiss up and patch things up with Russia with Putin, even though he considered Russia to be the biggest sponsor of Assad, his enemy. I see a similar scenario where he would be okay with patching things up with Hezbollah and the Iranians if this, helps him politically and on the ground in Syria.
Interesting. Well, General Kimmitt, Mr. Oren mentioned that for Iran, Iraq is the most important. That is something that, of course, is an understatement. But when we're talking about Hashd al-Sha'bi, naturally an alliance of 67 militias, 46 of which are backed and trained and funded by the Islamic Republic of Iran, they have been the least potent in the whole mix of militias, particularly also with attacks against Israel. Since November 2nd of 2023, they merely launched 150 unmanned aerial vehicles, one-way attack drones, if we may. That is not much considering the scale of the other proxies' involvement. What are we to take out of that?
Well, first of all, I think that these militias are the strongest allies of Iran right now, not out of choice, but out of necessity, simply because other countries, including yours, have done such a you all have taken care of Hezbollah, Hamas, Houthis pretty well. So in many ways, the only untouched force out there, if you can describe them as such, are the Iraqi Hashid. But things are very, very quiet in Iraq right now. Certainly not quiescent, but quiet. There's a sense around the country that they want to see what the Americans are going to do, one, and number two, how the elections are going to turn out. Now that Maliki is back in the game, there may be a closer affiliation with Iran. But candidly, I don't necessarily see a lot, from my friends telling me, I don't see a lot of Hashid activity running around maintaining illegal checkpoints. And quite frankly, aside from some crazy social media commentary for one or two groups, they have been quiet. Now, the issue, of course, is Iran has been supporting these groups for years and years. And if we talk about what's happened through the Hashid and how they've reacted over the past couple of decades in the other militias at times of stress from Iran, I think an all-out war between the United States and Iraq, between the United States and Iran, would be unprecedented. And I don't think we really can take past historical example of militia activity into account when you're looking at what these militias would do in a case of a war of the scale well beyond that of last June. I don't necessarily think that the Hashid are going to unite. I think that's probably in this region, I'd expect to see the Iraqi Hashid kind of hunker down. They may try a couple of symbolic attacks against, say, embassy personnel running around town or elsewhere, but I just don't see them. First of all, within federal Iraq, where the majority of the Hashid are, there aren't a lot of American targets in the first instance. They've all moved up to Erbil and Syria, and they're pretty well defended up there. So I would not consider Iraq to be much of a symbolic, that America to be a symbolic target for Iraq Hashid, simply because of the very, very few targets, with the exception of the compound by the airport and the U.S. Embassy, but unlikely that they would play a significant part.
Thank you, General Kimmitt. Mr. Abdel Hassan, we don't have very much time left, but I still would like to hear a sentence about Iraq from your perspective, and then a couple of sentences on the last proxy that we still want to discuss, and that is Ansar Allah, namely the dominated terror organization dominated by the Houthi tribe in Yemen.
Yeah, well, quickly on Hashd al-Sha'bi, I agree with Mark. They're militarily incompetent. I think the biggest threat that comes from them is the money. They officially receive $4 billion from the Iraqi government money a year. And Iran has been using this money as a slush fund to support Hezbollah, sometimes to finance the Houthis, and also for the generals of the IRGC. So this would be my biggest concern. I think this is something that can be fixed, but it certainly won't be fixed if Maliki is in power moving forward. About the Houthis differ from the other is that they're not the proteges of Iran, they are the allies of Iran. So even if Iran was to weaken, I think Houthis will independently remain where they are. Now, how much of a pain in the neck they will be to Israel, this remains to be seen, but they've proven to be quite savvy, whether militarily or in terms of politics, like we saw in their confrontation with the United States. So I wouldn't put them in the same bag where we put Hezbollah and the Hashd al-Shabi and the past Syrian militias that were pro-Iran.
General Kimmitt, you have 45 seconds to add on the Houthi portfolio.
I really don't have much to add to the Houthi portfolio. We're not getting shot at in the Red Sea. We've kind of taken our focus off the Houthis. In my last couple of seconds, I would just comment on what's happening in Syria right now, up in northeastern Syria. There are some that say we've abandoned the Kurds. The fact remains that it was always a temporary, transactional, and tactical relationship. Primarily as an agreement to the Turks. And what we have lost in terms of the loyalty of the SDF, I think we've regained our loyalty from the Turks. And in the long run, that's going to be more of a benefit to Israel than a relationship with the SDF.
Indeed. Mr. Oren, closing sentence.
The Iranian modus operandi, going back to the Shah, was use your allies to harass your adversaries. Israel with the Kurds against the Iraqis and so forth. This is what they are trying to do with their proxies. Their success has been very limited.
Indeed. Well, that's all the time that we have for today. I'd like to immediately thank General Kimmitt, Mr. Abdel Hassan, and Mr. Oren for all of your insights. I'd like to thank you at home until our next edition from here in Jerusalem. Shalom. For more of TV7's productions and editorials, we invite you to visit our website at www.tv7israelnews.com.
Jerusalem Studio, now available on Spotify.